What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Two things today. First, make sure you're on the email newsletter list. Go to coinmastery.com/invest. First name, email, sign up. Lots of good stuff in there. Second, I shot a video with my buddy Chris Dunn. Some of you guys may know Chris. And he put it on his YouTube channel yesterday. I'll link it below. If you are listening on the podcast, you can go to Chris Dunn TV, I believe his channel's called. We talked for about 30 minutes just about predictions for 2018. I think there's some stuff that you guys will find really interesting. I touched on it yesterday's video and podcast. So go check it out. Chris is a great guy. I've always been a fan of Chris's stuff. So I'll link to it. You can go check it out. And then we will just get into it. We'll dive in. Happy Tuesday. What's going on? All right. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin, what's going on with Bitcoin, kind of the interim state of Bitcoin, kind of the post-consensus hangover, so to speak. A little bit about what I'm seeing, what I'm doing about it, what you can do about it, and then a bit of news that I think is relevant. And I'm going to tie it in, kind of going off of what I was talking about yesterday, some of the things I learned last week or some of the observations I made. Forgot to mention yesterday, none of this is professional advice, which is always the fun disclaimer that all the lawyers love to hear. So we're taking a look at Bitcoin right now on Bitfinex. Yesterday, we really just looked at the long-term innovation versus price. Today, we're looking at actual price. Now, let's put it this way. As things get more ambiguous in terms of what the overall trend is, the better it is to zoom out and to play the bigger picture stuff. Meaning, if it is not overly clear that it's very bearish or very bullish, you should zoom out and see how things look and make your plan on a longer time frame. Okay, that's really important. That's something that I've learned over the last couple of years, and it's something that a lot of traders have also told me, is that understanding the trend, especially in crypto, is huge. And the reason I say that is because we often get sucked in to the kind of last few days. So for anyone listening, I'm just zooming in. I'm on the 4-hour chart, and you can see that it's just, this is pure chop. It's very hard to show that there's a clear trend other than maybe a 1 or 2 day down cycle, up cycle. But when you scroll out, you can start to see a bit of this bouncing up and down inside of this triangle. But even still, it's very hard to tell. It's almost just a kind of a sideways action, very hard to tell which way we're going. And so because of that, I don't think that there's a whole lot that the average person and even a lot of the above average people can and should be doing. It's just not a very profitable environment, at least today, because there's no clear trend. There's no momentum that is blatantly in the charts. Some people may disagree with me on that. That's just my perspective on it. And I think that the big kind of, when you look at the actual chart itself, there's still this huge gap, which, let me see if I can zoom out a bit to get you this guy's prices, right? Between 7,600 all the way down to, let's call it 6,800, at least on Bitfinex. That bar, this huge spike, that's still a big issue. May lend itself well for this price to come down and hit the bottom of this triangle. And then we go from there. But, you never know. There's a lot of support. There's a ton of historical support at this kind of 8,000 level. And because of that, because of the indecision, I am personally not taking any positions right now other than my holdings, right? Like, as many of you know, there's a holding position, there's a trading position. The holding position is typically much bigger as I learn how to get better at trading, but I'm just kind of sitting back and letting it do its thing, waiting for some clear signal to show me which direction this is going in, because that's when you can deploy some real capital and make some real profits off of it. So we're going to sit around and wait. Now, what does this mean for a lot of you guys? And I think that's the important question. Because one thing, especially in the bull run, that was discussed a lot is this idea of conviction. I know that I brought this up a lot. I know that I see this in a lot of different feeds and YouTube channels and stuff like that, is how important it is to have conviction in your investment thesis. Peter Thiel really spearheads this, and a lot of A lot of professional investors and traders do this as well. And the opposite of conviction is really diversification. So you diversify when you do not have conviction in one thing or a set of things, because it just gives you exposure to everything and you kind of get a blended index of the overall progress of the world. And so that's the way that I think I would approach this, right? Is when I do not have a very clear idea of if this is going up or down, my overall portfolio, not just in crypto, but in everything, I try to diversify it as much as possible. And that includes cash. It can include stocks. It can include bonds. It can include index funds. It can include whatever, crypto. I mean, whatever it is, however you invest, or within your own portfolio. Maybe you've got fiat. Maybe you've got Bitcoin. Maybe you've got a couple of altcoins. But at least you start to balance them out. And that's helpful to think about in situations like this. Always be checking and looking at your portfolio. Doesn't mean you have to make a move, but you want to be cognizant of it so that you're not sitting in a situation where you're overexposed if this goes way down or if it goes way up. You want to be able to be in a situation where you could easily go all in on something or go heavy on something when the opportunity presents itself. Chris and I talked about that in the video, actually, about I think the most valuable thing anybody can be doing right now is not necessarily trading or investing or finding the next winning coin. It's being prepared for when the opportunity or when that coin shows up, because it will. I can promise you in the next, it could be tomorrow all the way for the next 12 months, at some point, something is going to happen and you are going to see it and say, wow, this is a huge opportunity, and you want to be in a situation where you're ready to capitalize on that. So I think that just spending 20 minutes on that every day is really, really helpful. And that's just setting up your portfolio. And look, I know a lot of people are gonna be like, well, what's yours? Mine's different than yours. I've got different goals. I've got different position sizes. You've got to make your own decisions on what that means. The other thing that I've been looking at, which many of you guys know from Twitter, I posted this a couple weeks ago, the volatility index continues to be dropping. And I think that that's no surprise, given that the peaks of this recent volatility spike, which really was the month of January, so to speak, it continues to drop, and it's dropping even down to previous levels, and we'll see if it continues to drop even further. I think it probably will, given that this was the longest high volatility spread. But what that means, based on some loose analysis, is that when volatility hits rock bottom, right before it ramps again, that's when we see the biggest price movements. It doesn't necessarily mean up or down. It just means that we see the biggest collective spike in price because everybody agrees that that's the direction of it. And so while I think that we still have a little ways to go on this volatility, meaning we are going to get something is coming that will be everybody agrees that we are going, like, this is the right direction, whether it's down or up. But the kicker is that as soon as that happens, the volatility typically spikes, and there's going to be major confusion in the markets. Meaning, if this starts to dump or if this starts to pump over the next couple of weeks, be very focused on the fact that as soon as it makes a move one way or the other, there's going to be the 5 to 7 day lag of volatility, which is when there's going to be a lot of confusion, and that may take the price the exact opposite way very quickly. So just be aware of that. That's something that I've been watching. I think it's super important because there's a lot of people that want this price to make a very clear move. But if that clear move is done so that the real move can happen afterwards, that's going to screw a lot of people, both either way. It doesn't matter if it goes down first or up first. So something I've been thinking about, something I've been looking at. I think it can help you guys a lot too as you prepare and as you make your decisions. Looking at the altcoin market, I think that there's nothing new here. I know that that's kind of the boring answer, but it's true. I mean, this is truly what I'm doing. I'm taking my time. I'm researching it. One thing I am spending my time doing, just like I talked about yesterday in the video, is I'm trying to find out who's attracting the best talent. I think that that's going to be one of the best proxies for who's going to develop the best partnerships, who's going to get the best regulatory compliance clearance. And that's going to be a very good indicator on who's going to survive over the long term. That's why I'm focused. I mean, end of 2017, that's what I said. I think 2018, the top 20 coins is really where the action, that's where you want to spend a lot of your time. And that's where I spend a lot of my time researching and reaching out to these companies and finding out who's attracting who, and more importantly, like who's not attracting people, who kind of has a bad name from, if you're the CEO of some big company or if you're the CFO or whatever, what coins are attractive, what companies are attractive, what companies are not attractive. So that's what I'm doing, and trying to just dig in and see what the overall picture looks like. Now, speaking of what's going on with the regulatory stuff, the CFTC, so in the United States, that's the Commodities Future Trading Commission, which deals with not necessarily like the stock market. They deal with the exchanges of the stock market, and then they deal with a lot of the derivative products. They deal with commodities, things like corn and sugar, because that's all based on futures. You don't actually go out and buy a bag of sugar. You buy a derivative product that is priced on the price of sugar, right? That's how you securitize a product. And that's what the CFTC does. And so they did a press release, I'll link this up, where they basically said that they need more oversight into exchanges so that they can create more derivative products in crypto. That's kind of what's between the lines in this press release. What that means is that they want to be able to work with exchanges, in the United States at least, and be able to do what they do, audits and compliance and all that, statements and all that sort of thing, so that they can potentially facilitate new forms of derivative products. The most likely will be things like future swaps, not future swaps, just swaps, futures, options. If you don't know what that means, it's just basically betting on prices at some point, right? It's kind of a new thing you can trade. BitMEX does this, but BitMEX is located in the Seychelles, which is why it's not available in certain countries, because they have these derivative products, but it's not regulated the way it needs to be in the CFTC, which is why you don't see it. You don't see those products in the US yet. But I have a very good feeling that they will, especially as the CFTC comes in. Now, the reason why this is good is because this is obviously going to bring in a lot of money. It's going to bring in a lot of institutions. It won't necessarily change the spot price, which is kind of, it doesn't really help. But what it does do is it brings money and interest over to the crypto space. So that momentum that comes over does bring over the labor, it brings over the people, it brings over the human capital, because now that there's more to trade, the derivatives market is $700 trillion with a T, 700 trillion. So part of that moves over into crypto. It can add to a whole new kind of paradigm of ways that money can come in. And then eventually we'll see these companies being built that are the coins and the currencies. It won't necessarily affect the price, like I said, but it will make the market bigger and stronger so that the winning companies and coins in crypto can thrive. People can make big bets on them. And that's critical for big markets, companies like this, to get exposure to the mass population, not media. Another thing that I saw yesterday that I thought was really interesting is in Binance, they released True USD, which is a stable coin that is backed by audited 1-to-1 US dollars that are in reserves. Now, this was released, I believe, on Bittrex. It was also released on maybe Poloniex, a couple other exchanges, and then last night it was released on Binance. And it was interesting. There was an article I saw about this. When it first released, there's so many bots and there's so much demand that it messes up the amount of potential supply in the reserves. And so True USD was actually trading for like $1.04 for a couple, like maybe like an hour or so. And they've since, fixed this issue. But if you go into, let's go to the 1 minute chart, you can see that it's still pretty volatile. So for something that's supposed to be pegged to the dollar, it's still trying to figure this out. Now, there's no opportunity here. Like trying to trade this, don't even bother. What is interesting though, is that you can start to watch the flow of capital into something like True USD on a platform like Binance, and it can give you insights into where the money is flowing, right? Tether, because of its reputation and because it was, there's just a lot of things with Tether. Many people were apprehensive to move out of altcoins into something that was let's call it a stable coin. If True USD ends up being a more credible, safer option, which all signs point to that it is so far, but time will tell. I think that this is going to be a very good proxy at being able to see what some of the short-term price movements will be in the market, especially for Bitcoin, because that's, I believe, the only True USD market that's being traded right now on Binance or any of these exchanges. But Binance is just so much bigger. Meaning, if you watch this, right, so right now it's doing 1,400 BTC in 24-hour volume. If that volume continues to go up and it's like a lot of buy volume, you can start to see that, that could have a big impact on Bitcoin, right? And you can potentially see it as a leading indicator on Bitcoin, right? Because Binance doesn't control the entire market, but Binance could be one of the leading factors that gives you even a 20-minute head start onto what a Bitcoin price movement could be. So keep this in mind. We talked about stablecoins a little bit yesterday, but I do think that this is going to be an interesting experiment, both from how this affects the market itself, but also how people can measure capital flows on exchanges. That's a big deal. That makes a huge difference. Lastly, I'm reading this article. So it's ccn.com, which I would say is like 60% legit. But this information has been verified with other sources. TZero, which is, I think they're still doing an ICO or a pre-sale or something. TZero is essentially an exchange. It's like a New York Stock Exchange, but it's for securitized crypto assets. So if you securitize your token, or if you securitize your cryptocurrency, or if you securitize your real estate, if you securitize anything, TZero is a place theoretically where you can trade it. And so they just announced a partnership with the Boston Stock Exchange. I believe that TZero and Polymath are very closely tied. Polymath, I believe they're doing something with like the Barbados Stock Exchange. Maybe they're buying, I don't know. And this is by no means an endorsement of TZero or Polymath. In fact, I would be skeptical at who's going to win this this arms race for the securitization of tokens. But what it does, this does open up a whole new set of questions that need to be asked in the regulatory space, so that crypto and securitization can easily move into existing securities products. Meaning, the New York Stock Exchange can start trading, whatever, like Stellar Lumens, or it can start trading Omise Go or Icon or any of these coins if they meet the security requirements. It doesn't necessarily need to be on TZero. But this is going to be a super interesting paradigm, because TZero and Polymath and Harbor and all these security protocol tokens are coming at trying to build it from the ground up. And then on the other side, you've got the established, like the NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, the Nikkei, all the worldwide exchanges. And they're coming at it and being like, how do we merge these two together? And historically, it's very difficult for new exchanges to survive, right? Like the guy in Flash Boys who started was like the NEX I think maybe it's not called the NX. It's some sort of, it's an exchange that doesn't allow high frequency trading. And he's had a very hard time getting the volume in the contracts because the big established exchanges are so big. That's why I think that it's the securitization of crypto, I think, is obviously going to be the story of the next 12 months. But it's not going to be as simple as people think. It's really going to be like doing an IPO, where you have to do all the paperwork and get, SEC and at least the United States, and then you can get compliant, and then you can launch your product, and maybe there's a lockup, but then you can get listed on these security exchanges, right? The New York Stock Exchange, whatever. And that's how the process is going to go. And moving forward, almost all coins that are new should be prepared to basically do an IPO that looks like an ICO from an operation standpoint. So there's tokens and everything else, but the regulatory legal framework to make it a security token really just, it's going to have to be the SEC, the way they do it. I would be personally shocked if the SEC said, oh, okay, well, you guys crypto can just have a new process for securitizing anything. To me, that's crazy. I think that they're going to work with people to try to create a framework to help do it, but the nuts and bolts of what it takes is going to stay the same. And so that being said, I think that any new coins that are coming out, especially anything in the United States, should definitely have a big legal team on staff, or at least on retainer or something, who can deal with these sort of SEC compliance issues in a big way, right? It's not a small deal to go public. That's how investment banks used to make a ton of their money. Now they make it on high frequency trading, but that's going to be a big deal. And then you look at existing coins, and this is something that I took away from a couple of conversations I had in New York, is that let's say that securitizing tokens does become a real thing, and the CFTC walks into Coinbase and Poloniex into Bittrex and maybe Kraken, but all these US-based exchanges, and say, look, you can keep doing this, but you need to be under CFTC jurisdiction. We need to audit your exchange, and in order to do that, you can only list coins that not only match the security laws, but have gone through all the regulatory requirements necessary. And when you look at the list of coins that are out there as required, that could afford or even have the interest in doing that sort of process, the list gets very short. And I personally think that that's going to be one of the things that causes a lot of coins to disappear. Or, when everyone talks about, 90% of coins are going to fade away, or whatever it means, they're going to fail or not survive. I think that might be the thing that does it, where the US government says, look, if you want to be listed, great. You got to become a security. You got to go through this process, and it's going to be expensive, and it's going to take a while. And that's when you get down to a lot of these coins, and they're going to say, well, either screw this and they kind of just stop doing it, or they just move to overseas exchanges and they try to do it over there. But history would tell you that the same thing is going to happen in other countries as well, in different order. The securitization is always going to be a big thing. So I think that's just, it's a kind of unfortunate real truth, but it's also what's required for this is how the system works. And I think that is and was the tone of consensus. And you guys can all see it. You can see it on social media networks and wherever people hang out. Twitter, Reddit, Telegram, wherever. There's kind of this feeling of like crypto is getting swallowed by the traditional system, right? The the magic of crypto is being lost in some way to this old world, right? And like now we're just kind of back to where we started from. And I think that that's a really just, I don't really know how to react to that, to be perfectly honest. Like, I think that there is a lot of truth to that. I also think that it doesn't mean that a lot of great things can't happen, right? But I think that this is an asset class, and it's not necessarily a currency as much as it used to be, right? At least not now from an adoption standpoint. And as long as it remains in asset class one, that means the price is going to probably go way up in the next 5-10 years. But it also means that it probably won't be the same take down the world thing that many people hoped it would be. I don't know. I think that may be part of the trade-off. I think some people don't like the fact that is a potential trade-off, and some people are fine with that being a potential trade-off. But I do think that it's very hard to have your cake and eat it too when it comes to money on this level. And we're still like a needle in a haystack when it comes to the size of this versus the global, markets. But I don't know. That's what one of my takeaways from. And I'm not pissed about it. And I could be completely wrong, which would be good for some reason, and it would also probably be bad for some reasons. But I do think that when you're meeting with people who are right in the thick of it and who understand the real game that's going on with all of these coins and the amount of money that's coming in and the way that investments are working, they're all pointing to that. They're all saying that regulation is the big problem. And the way that we're going to get around that is to find ways to play ball with regulators. And time will tell. So all that being said, how does that wrap up? Honestly, it means that this price is probably just going to keep bouncing around. It's going to go up, down for a little bit longer. The volatility is going to continue to go down, and then it's going to dip and bottom out for a minute. That's when we're going to see some really serious price action. And then we're going to start to see some real movement in this market. We're going to also see a lot of this. I think the other big takeaway is to understand what securitization of assets mean. It's a very, very complex and big thing, but it's like how startups become securitized. They have to go through a huge process so they can become public. That's not just a small little, fill out this form and you're securitized now. And I think in crypto, it's often reduced to that, but it is a big deal. We'll see what happens. So exciting times. I'm very interested in this. I would also encourage people to keep an eye on what's going on in the global economy, in the global financial markets, especially with the central banks around the country. Lots going on with South America, Europe, big time. That's going to play an interesting role in what's going on here. So just something to keep in mind. I think that's going to be interesting, especially for Bitcoin itself. All right. Well, guys, as always, it's great. Tuesday, rocking out. And I will catch you tomorrow. All right. Peace out.